York, a former city and district within Toronto, Ontario, Canada, lies to the northwest of Old Toronto, to the southwest of North York, and to the east of the Humber River. York holds a significant place in Canadian history, as it was the original settlement that eventually grew into the vibrant metropolis of Toronto. 19-year-old Mabel Crumback resided at 661 Willard Avenue in the former York Township. She was described as a pretty, lovely-mannered, decent young woman who trusted everyone. She was religious and frequently went to St. John's Baptist Church, where she participated in the choir and engaged in various social activities hosted by the church. Quiet, reliable and sensible, Mabel was employed at steel fabricating company Eastern Steel Company as an office stenographer. It was Sunday, May 27th, 1950. Mabel's parents, Sheldon and Helen, had travelled to a wedding in Detroit, Michigan for the weekend, leaving Mabel at home to take care of Gary, her 8-year-old brother. Her older brother, 11-year-old Bruce, was not at the residence that evening. After the clock struck midnight on May 28th, Mabel returned home to the Willard Avenue residence following a date night with her boyfriend, James Bryan. Gary saw his sister at approximately 12:30 a.m, and she seemed content with nothing out of the ordinary. The house fell silent, and the siblings fell into a slumber. A few hours later, 8-year-old Gary woke suddenly. He described hearing what sounded like, quote, a dogfight downstairs. He recalled hearing a dog barking, a cacophony of male voices, and a high-pitched laughter from what he deciphered to be Mabel. In his sleepy state, he thought little of it, and subsequently fell asleep once more. Later that Sunday, Sheldon and Helen returned from Detroit to a home that sat in an eerie stillness. Anxiety began to flood in, as Gary told them he couldn't find Mabel, and he had notified the neighbours who had contacted the police. Furthermore, both front and rear side doors of the property were unlocked, which was highly unusual and something their daughter would never have normally done. The front door looked out onto Willard Avenue, and although unlocked, was closed. The rear side door, however, which looked out onto St. John Road, was left open. Investigating Mabel's bedroom, it was discovered that a red and black checkered shirt, a blue plaid skirt, black suede shoes, and a comb were missing. Strangely, her pyjama top was missing, however, Mabel's pyjama bottoms were found neatly tucked beneath her pillow. Her purse and cash lay in her bedroom untouched. Treating her vanishing as an abduction, police began door-to-door inquiries regarding the mysterious disappearance of Mabel Crumback. Chillingly, a number of neighbours recalled disturbing events in the night. At approximately 2 a.m, one neighbour heard a distressing scream. A second witness recalled hearing many voices coming from the kitchen of the Crumback residence, with lights on in both the kitchen area and in Mabel's bedroom. A third stated that they saw 3 strange men sitting in a parked car in the area. In June of 1950, 2 weeks after Mabel's vanishing, the North Bay Nugget reported that a witness had seen Mabel at a tourist home in Ancaster. The individual who reported the sighting confirmed that a man with a hare lip, also known as a cleft palate, had been in her company, and the pair allegedly headed west together. The witness was Mrs. Wesley Jenny, who was the owner of Highland Cabins, a camping site for tourists and travellers. Having been shown a photograph of the missing 19-year-old, she was certain that the woman she saw was Mabel. According to Jenny, the woman had appealed to her for help and said that she was with the man against her will. However, Jenny paid no attention to her pleas. Jenny further stated that the woman had bleach blonde hair, despite Mabel being known as having raven black hair, and she reported that the woman acted oddly, as if she was under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Mrs. Jenny commented that the woman told her she had been forced to bleach her hair and alter her appearance, likely to avoid being identified. Jenny only notified authorities of her encounter with the woman after reading about Mabel Crumback's disappearance in the newspapers. Sheldon and Helen Crumback did not believe that the woman Mrs. Jenny conversed with was their daughter, as Mrs. Jenny recalled the woman lighting a cigarette. However, according to Mabel's mother, she was not a smoker. Mabel also had a habit of biting her nails to a degree where it was very noticeable, and Mrs. Jenny didn't describe this specific detail when recalling her interaction with the blonde woman. Investigators appealed to the public for aid in finding the blonde woman and the man with the cleft lip. Unfortunately, not much came from this appeal. However, several sightings of a dishevelled woman matching Mabel's description was seen in the days following her disappearance. In Oakland, Brant County, Mount Pleasant farmer Albert McAllister recalled that on the 12th of June, just over 2 weeks after Mabel disappeared, he witnessed a young woman sleeping behind a roller in one of his farm's fields. Albert approached and woke the dark-haired stranger, who, upon being roused, panicked and fled through the hayfields towards a side road where she disappeared out of sight. Following this, Albert McAllister called the police. Interestingly, Mabel's grandparents, George and Libby Crumback, resided near Oakland, Brant County. Other family members lived within a few hundred yards of Albert McAllister's farm. It was theorised that Mabel may have been travelling to a relative's home. After Albert's statement was published in the newspapers, other witness reports were filed by the police which indicated that this unidentified, dishevelled woman was seen living out on the street. Searches by air, horseback, and on foot took place throughout Brant County, with local volunteers and Boy Scouts aiding police in their search. Unfortunately, nothing significant was recovered from these searches, leaving Mabel's loved ones aching for answers. As time marched on, reports of sightings dwindled and the case went cold. In 1956, Mabel's disappearance hit the headlines once again, when a travelling hypnotist made comments during a meeting at Sydenham Street United Church in Kingston, Ontario, suggesting that Mabel had been murdered. Known as Jim, the man stated under an alleged hypnotic trance from his partner, Dr. Mason, that he knew where Mabel's body had been buried. Members of the club meeting were stunned at this apparent revelation, and there was a commotion following the incident. When Jim was taken out of the alleged trance he had been in, he claimed that he had never heard of Mabel Crumback, nor had any knowledge of her disappearance. The Expositor newspaper brought the pair in for an interview, where Jim, once again under hypnosis, revealed further alleged details about Mabel's fate. Jim alleged that a man had taken Mabel into a car and passed through Brantford, driving on Burford Road, then drove south to Scotland. Jim then claimed that the man stopped the vehicle and upon exiting the car struck Mabel fatally with a wrench. Once the alleged murder had taken place, Jim further stated that the man buried her in a location that he pinpointed as being a wooded area, 1.5 miles north of Scotland on a farm owned by a Walter Paderak. Jim, Dr. Mason, and reporters from the Expositor newspaper ventured to the area where they crossed over rugged, snow-dusted fields to the alleged burial site, where Jim pointed at a specific area indicating a shallow grave. Reporters were shocked when, following this, Jim unexpectedly vomited. Police were notified and arrived at the scene, where they began digging. However, they eventually called off the dig, with no evidence to suggest that a body had been buried there. Inspector Walter Corson of the York Township Police Force said he did not believe Dr. Mason and Jim's story to be a hoax, and at that point in the investigation would follow any tips that were received. This was the last major update published about the investigation into Mabel's disappearance. Years passed with no answers as to what occurred on the night Mabel vanished. Sheldon and Helen Crumback moved to the south of Ontario with their sons Gary and Bruce. Sheldon and Helen both passed away in 1983 and 1984 respectively, without ever knowing what happened to their daughter. In 1997, the Expositor reported that Mabel's brothers did not wish to discuss their sister's case, with an unnamed woman telling the publication that both men just wanted to forget it and move on. At the time she disappeared, Mabel Crumback was 19 years of age. She is described as a Caucasian female of a fair complexion, standing at 155 centimetres or 5 feet 1 inches tall, and had black curly hair. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Mabel Crumback, you can contact Toronto Police Service Missing Persons Unit by calling 416-808-7411 or by direct email missingpersons@torontopolice.on.ca.